Hi, and welcome to Tuesday's Tips with Laurie. I'd like to wish everyone, I hope they had a great summer because it seems like fall is in the air, especially here, and kids are back to school. So now it's really time to sew, right? Get out your fun projects and get ready to get going. So to start with today, I've had several people ask me, how do I go about starting to cut a large piece of fabric and cut it down to the projects that I want? So just for today I thought, I might go over a few basics on cutting fabric and then talk a little bit more about calculating your fabrics. If you wanted to go and purchase more and you're like, I don't know how much to go get, how much do I need? Or to finish this project, how much more do I need? So let's cover a few of those. I hope you like math because there is math involved in this. So today I just wanted to show you kind of what I'm going to be cutting out. I'm cutting out these pennants. These are some fun pennants that we have recently released. There's summer and there's fall. And there's the alphabet one. And this is part of the summer collection. Isn't that fun? So to start with, you get a good workspace area. I just have a yard of fabric. And a lot of times if you're going to shop hops, you'll say, just give me a yard. I'm not sure how much I'll need, just give me a yard, right? So that's why I started with the yard. But if you have a smaller fabric cutting table, your yard covers your whole fabric cutting space. So the basics, this is what I would recommend. I always start with selvage to selvage edges, and then I pull the fold towards me, and then I'll lay the excess off to the side, and then I fold it in half one more time, and it creates this folded line. That's where I'm going to start my cuts from, and I just pull the line down to a line, or the fold to a line, so it's lined up. And then I take my ruler and I trim this edge off. And generally when I trim, I want to make sure, double check that you've got all the layers, because sometimes they're not straight cuts. Sometimes you end up with a cut that's slightly crooked. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to cut off. So now I've got a 90-degree that I know this edge is straight and I know this edge is straight, and I know I can calculate from there. So for example, let's say we're going to make 4 of these cute little tiny ones. So I happen to know that in the book it'll tell you that these need to be 4 by 10 inches tall because it's the front and the back. So I'm thinking, how many can I make, right? Well, what you do is you take your width of your fabric, and most fabrics are 42 inches. So I know that if I'm making something that's 10 inches by 4 inches, the best way to calculate that in, and in this case you can use 40, so either way you can cut it 4 inches across, and you know that 40 divided by 10 is 4, so I know I can get 4 banners or pennants out of that one cut. So that's the way I go about calculating how many. Let's say, for example, it's a directional fabric and I don't want it to go up and down, I want it to go across. In that case, I would say, okay, if I cut it at 10 inches, how many am I going to get the opposite way? There again, you would say I can take 4 into 40 10 times. So I know I can get 10 banners cut the other direction if I go 10 inches across. And that way, I'm like, oh, I can get 10 banners and it's directional. Let's say it's a cute balloon and you want the balloons to sit upright. On a happy birthday balloon banner, you want that background fabric to look like it's right side up and not sideways. Especially if you're doing something with stripes or chevron stripes, something to that nature, you'll definitely want to make sure that you change the direction according to how you want it to look. And that's how you would calculate, is always keep that number 40 or 42 depending on your width of your fabric of what you can calculate. So let's say I'm going to be making, now I'm going to make the Chanel. Well, it requires 4 pieces of Chanel per letter in this, right? And so I'm thinking, oh wow, if I make 10 pennants, I need 4 layers, that's 40 pieces of fabric. Do I have enough? That's a good question. So if you want them all the same color, you can calculate it this way. Let's say it's a 7 by 8 inch piece that I need, and I need 40 of those. That can be overwhelming, right? So what I do is I look at this and go, okay, I've got 42 inches is my width of fabric. 7 goes into 42 6 times, right? So I know I'm going to get 6 pieces out of one cut. And my one cut's going to be 8 inches across. So let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to count over 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I've got 8 across, and I cut, and then I'm going to take this, and I know that if I open this up and I trim off the selvage edge, I still have 42 inches of fabric, but it's doubled over, so there's 21 inches right here. But I know that 42 divided by 7, because I've got my 7 cut left, my 7-inch cut left, is 6, right? So I'm going to open this up before I cut it. And the reason I'm doing that, if I left it this way and I were to cut that, that's 4 layers. I'm only going to get 4 cuts, right? So I need 6 cuts. So I'm going to open it up. And the reason I open up this last couple of pieces, you have to unfold, and you'll want to unfold your fabric. So sometimes you'll fold it, sometimes you won't. So I cut off the selvage edge, and then that's when I start making my cuts. Now I'm going to make 1 cut. This is still doubled, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's my 6 cuts. So let's make sure that this works, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This time it's the 7-inch. And there's 2 of my 7 by 8 inches. I'm going to do that one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And there's 3, 4 of my 7 by 8 inch cuts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And it's just barely cutting off the fold. And there I have all 6 of my pieces, and they're 7 by 8 inches. So now you know if I cut 1 cut at 8 inches, and it makes 6 of these, and I wanted 40, right? So I'm going to end up cutting 42, essentially. So 6 times 7 is 42. So I know that I'm going to need how many cuts across? Let's see if anybody's paying attention to the math. So let's review this again. This was 8 inches across, and I got 6 of them, but I wanted 42 of them. So I'm going to have 7 cuts, right? So 7 cuts each, and they're how wide? They're 8 inches each. So 7 times 8 is 56. So that's how many inches of fabric I'm going to need, which is just over a yard. So to make 42 cuts like this, that's how I would calculate it. It's a little bit easier if you break it down and say, I just cut 1 strip, and it's 8 inches across, and I got 6 of them, and I need how many more? And then you know how many times you're going to need to make that cut. Then I know that I've got what I need. So I only bought a yard of this, and I'm going to need a little over a yard, right? It lets you know ahead of time before you make your project what you're going to need. So let me go on to applique pieces. So let's say you've got scrap fabric and you don't have the full 42 inches and you want to cut something out of your scrap fabric. So here's a piece of scrap fabric, and you can see we've already used it for something here. So with that piece missing, I want to know, can I still cut what I need? So what I do is I will fold it end to end, and I happen to have the selvages on still, but if they've been cut off and you're not sure, measure it when it's in half, and then you can double that and say, okay, I know that's what I've got to work with. Let's just say for sake that it's 10 inch or 20 inches, so I've got 40 inches to work with and not 42. What I do when I'm folding this again, I fold it down, but I keep my spot that's missing on the top. That's a good tip, because you know how many times you'll cut it and you'll go, oh man, that piece wasn't quite big enough. So what I like to do is keep my missing piece, if you will, on top. And there again, I line up the fold. I'm looking right here at this fold. I'm going to line the fold itself up. And then I'm going to cut this edge so it's straight, and you can see that it wasn't straight, so now it is. And now I'm going to measure how much I do have. See how this piece is missing. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If I go here to 7, ooh, I just barely make that 7 inches. So I could cut this 7 inches across this time, but it's not 8 across, right? It's only 7 across. So instead of it going this way, which is what we cut last time, I'm going to flip my design and I'm going to cut it this way just to give me a little bit more. That's how you would make sure that you get as much as you can out of your fabric. So if I were to cut this at 7 inches, then I know, and I say it was only 40 inches and I needed 8 of them, how many would I get? I would get 5, right? So I would get 5 full pieces out of this, and then I'm still looking at this one sitting in front of me, and I can see that there's going to be 1 less. So if I got 5 out of this one, I know I'm going to get 4 out of the second one, and that will give me 9 pieces. So that's how I would calculate what I've got left over as scrap fabric. And then for applique, sometimes you have a big overwhelming piece and you're like, here's a great example. This is a scrap piece of fabric we have here, and I just need a smaller piece cut out of it. Well, which direction would you cut it out? I always go for the smaller end, and I would cut off this end, which leaves you still a little bit bigger piece of fabric. So that's how I would recommend when you're cutting out scrap fabric. So for example, I need something that's, let's just do this itty bitty little pumpkin. Well, rather than cutting the whole thing and then I have a smaller scrap piece that I might not use, I look at the pumpkin. I just know off the top of my head that it's a 3 by 4 inch piece of applique that I'm going to need for that. So I come down here and I look at this and I can see, look, there was a 3 by 3 inch piece cut out and I need 3 by 4, so I simply am going to just extend this line and I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, so it's to the 7 mark, and then I'm going to turn it and cut 1, 2, 3, 4 right there. And there's my little piece, and I didn't waste any of this extra fabric by cutting it off and making little smaller pieces, because a lot of times we have a lot of little tiny pieces. So that's kind of how I would chunk into a larger piece of fabric to get my applique piece. And you can see this applique piece is plenty big to cover that. You can do your applique and trim it, and there you go. Especially when it comes to the glitter flex, you don't want to be wasting that stuff. It is really sweet, wonderful stuff. So that's how I would go about cutting the glitter flex as well, is just find out how much you need and how it fits, kind of like Tetris. If you've ever played Tetris, fabric is about the same thing, especially when you're working with scraps. If you are working with a binding or anything, the binding, there's no binding in this book, but you go about it the same way. The way you would do the binding would be, you would measure over, let's say it's 2 1/4 inches. You make 1 cut. 1 cut gives you 40 inches, right? And you're going to take off a couple of inches every time you piece that binding together. And once you piece that binding together, then you've got your long strip. So if you've got, let's say it's 105 inches around your project, I would take 105 and I would divide it by, instead of 40, I'm taking those couple extra inches off because that's the width of my binding. I would do it by 38. So I would take 105, divide it by 38, and that will tell you how many strips that you need to cut. So let's say you're going to cut 7 strips. If you're going to cut 7 strips, and then I get a piece of paper and pencil so I can remember. So if I'm cutting 7 strips and they're 2 1/2 inches each, then you would calculate that out, and that's how many inches of fabric that you need. So I'm just going to make it 3 so it's easier. So 21 inches of fabric. Well, 21 inches calculates roughly to about 2/3 of a yard of fabric. So you can just say, oh, I need 2/3 of a yard of fabric for my binding. And that's how I go about calculating what I need for bindings, for whatever it may be. It goes by the number of cuts, and just remember each cut is whatever width of your fabric. So if your fabric's 40 inches or 42, that's what you go by. And I hope this helped, and I hope that you'll enjoy your projects, your summer projects, for the rest of the winter time, I guess it's getting fall and winter. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.